Anesthesiologists of Reddit, what was something you won't forget hearing from someone that was under? I had an ovarian cyst removed a year ago and woke up from the anesthesia saying hand please, and making grabby hands with both my hands until the nurses finally came over and held my hands for about 5 minutes while I just smiled and tried to go back to sleep. I hadn't done that in a decade. I used to do it to my dad all the time as a kid to express that I wanted to hold his hand while I slept. Or, that's so cute. I recently had surgery for endometriosis, and I did the exact same thing. The nurses nicely held my hand before setting it back on the bed once I calmed down. Apparently this lasted for 15 to 20 minutes until I realized they had tucked the stuffed animal I brought under my arm and that I could hold it instead. They put bandages on it in the same place I had them. I'm 24, but because of COVID I had to be alone and a stuffed animal was the best I could do. The rabbit. My boyfriend at the time had just gotten his wisdom teeth removed. On the ride home with his mouth full of gauze, he gets a call on his cell phone. He answered it and just starts talking away. Whoever it was on the other side could not possibly understand a word he was saying with all the gauze in his mouth. But man, he had a lot to talk about, and they apparently didn't hang up. After about 5 minutes of this unintelligible phone conversation he looks at me and says oh I robot, and gives me the phone. I put it to my ear, and the whole time it's been the Walgreens pharmacy automated notice simply stating his prescription is ready for pickup, playing on repeat. Probably for the best. I ask a patient after surgery how he feels. He opens his eyes, stares me dead on, and says with my fingers. Then he goes right back to sleep. This man has at least 2 kids. I'm an anesthesiologist. The best story was a 40-some-year-old woman for appendectomy said while I'm giving the propofol to induce anesthesia. She said oh I don't remember it tasting like that before slurred. I said what does it taste like, since propofol doesn't usually elicit a taste reaction. She almost yelled "Is it nuts?" and was promptly under anesthesia thereafter. There have been other stories, but this one has the entire OR staff rolling laughing for minutes after she was under. Priceless LMAO. This was a planned strike. My aunt got rushed to the hospital for abnormal heart rate, but it wasn't a heart attack or stroke, but her heart was going at like 200 beats per minute, or whatever it was. They had to put her under so they could shock her heart back to normal. As they are taking her under, the doctor says something like okay, in it goes, and she immediately quips with that's what she said. All the doctors and nurses busted a gut laughing and told my uncle when he got there. He just shrugged and said that's my wife for ya. One summer I was home from college and my dad needed me to pick him up after his very first colonoscopy. He was nervous, so I got there early. The nurse called me back and asked me to help wake him up as they were having some trouble. I go back and I'm making chit chat. Oh dad, you've got those cool booties on. He raised his head a little bit to look at them then yelled, booty cool. He is a Presbyterian pastor. A moment I will treasure forever. Have you told him this, or is it a secret you're hanging on to? One time a male biology student in his early 20s with a stuck kidney stone, was being put under for surgery, just as the anesthesiologist was pushing meds and telling me to count back from 100. I looked up at him in a drugged but focused gaze and said you're so pretty, you could be in movies in blackness. Anesthesiologist was like a grizzled 70-year-old hunched back looking guy with a lopsided grimace and more ear hair than head hair. Great doc though. Very last thing I remember hearing was the OR nurses cracking up laughing. It was a smallish medical community and I knew some of the people there, so as a joke somebody snuck his headshot into my chart. I like to think it was him gunning for a second career though. Edit. Due to the rather sensitive nature of the surgery he hit me with a wallop of midazolam on the way into the OR, so I was already pretty juiced by the time they started. My husband had to undergo a colonoscopy, and when he came around he started aggressively grilling the staff about Abraham Lincoln. He isn't a historian or anything, he works as a business analyst, and knows next to nothing about Abraham Lincoln. Bonus story, one time he took Ambien, and got super fucked up. Initially told me that he couldn't walk up the stairs to bed because he was a transformer and his legs had turned to wheels. Finally got him upstairs and he made the observation that if peach trees could sing to each other like whales it would be beautiful. I bet they would sing Adele. Then he burst into tears. He made the observation that if peach trees could sing to each other like whales it would be beautiful. I bet they would sing Adele. Then he burst into tears. This is beautiful, and I unironically love it. I have no recollection of this, but according to my mom, when she met me in the recovery room after wisdom tooth extraction I was very eager to tell her something, but my mouth was full of gauze. So they gave me a pen and I wrote something on the surgical bib. Hours later, when I was back in reality she asked me what was with the meow meows, my son. I had no idea what she was talking about, so she showed me the bib. It said, meow 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 the meow mix theme. This was stuck in my head for a good solid decade and now it's back. Not that I'm complaining. I had a guy, nefarious character, heavy drug use history, who got a bunch of ketamine, probably too much, in recovery from one of the other docs, to help with severe pain after his abscess drainage. I was asked to check on him in an hour as the other doc had left for the evening. Went over and saw him in the K-hole drooling on himself but otherwise fine, so I left, and came back an hour later. First thing he says to me is, "Why did you do that to me?" I asked him what he meant and he said, "You don't understand. I lived another man's life in there." I apologized and asked him, "How long do you think you were in there?" For reference it had been something like an hour and a half or 2 hours since his trip began. I don't know, maybe 30 years. I was speechless. I apologized again, made sure he knew he was safe, made sure he wasn't hurting, and made damn sure he knew it wasn't me that did it to him. TLDR, patient time traveled 30 years in the K-hole. Kind of on topic, when my mom woke up after having a stroke, the doctor asked if she recognized the people in the room. She got my sister's name right, called me my brother's name, and smiled real big at my stepdad, and called him arsehole. Called me my brother's name. My dad and several others do that all the time and none of them had a stroke. My mom calls me by our dog's name all the time. Patient here. Came out of anesthesia and heard got I somebody that I used to know playing in the recovery room. I asked my so why they were playing it at like 10x the normal speed and the nurse just goes, "Okay, so she's not ready to go home yet lol." Lol, is that a thing? I guess your perception must be so delayed or intermittent that it plays fast in your mind. How about the other way around? I took my mom for her surgery on her right shoulder and her anesthesiologist was this very dignified, solemn older Persian gentleman. My mom told him, "Just so you know, I wrote directions on myself to make sure you get it right." She was joking around, but she actually does this. Old battle axe nurse habits die hard. He looked her straight in the eye and said deadpan, "Great. So let's get started on your left knee." Totally got her. It was great. Apparently, when I had surgery to remove my Bartholin's gland, a gland at the entrance of the vagina that can get an abscess, they asked me how I felt as soon as I was awake. I said I felt like I got fucked by an elephant, and then I wanted to hug everyone. Wait, would you be willing to explain why you had to have surgery to remove this gland? This feels like something people should know about. I have had a vagina for a solid number of years and did not know that this was a thing. I'm glad you're okay. Not an anesthesiologist, but a story from my mom about me. While I was under, I had a double jaw surgery scheduled for April 21st, 2016. The procedure was fine. I remember waking up halfway through it and getting more anesthesia. After the surgery ended, they put me into the hospital room to let the drugs wear off of me. I don't remember much of this time, so this comes from my mom, but she was sitting in the room with me, watching the news on the TV. I wake up, and I'm quiet for a little bit, before I start sobbing. My mom thinks it's because my mouth hurts. My mouth is wired shut, so I actively can't correct her with words, and have to try and write out, on paper, what I'm crying about. The news was broadcasting about Prince's death, and I was hysterical over the fact that I apparently killed Prince, and that I had to turn myself in. I was working when I got a text from my little sister. "I'm sorry, your husband is dead." She lives in Florida, me, Arizona. I got married recently, and she's never talked to my husband. I was so busy at the time, but had to stop and was freaking out. Text her back. What? She said, Prince is dead. I was in love with him my whole life. But I was thinking my real husband was dead. I still cried, though. This guy I was dating, he asked me to take him to get his wisdom teeth removed. He told me that anesthesia doesn't affect him a lot, and we were supposed to go on a road trip the next day. So anyway, he gets wheeled out of the dentist by an old nurse. I'm behind the driver's seat and I see him smacking his lips looking up at the sky. She opens my car door, and he said, I love her. I love her. He then proceeded to ask me to marry him several times. He tried to pull out his gauze, and I told him stop, and he said, man, this bitch is bossy. Then he wanted a milkshake. I would suggest a place and he would scream no. Finally we agree on a place, and he tells me he'll give me directions. I drive for 15 minutes before I ask him what we are doing, and he said he has no idea. We're in the drive-thru, and he says, I have something for you. I swear I thought he had bought me a ring the way he had been proposing for last hour. It was his newly extracted teeth. They let me keep them. I want you to have them. He lived on base at the time and was yelling at the gate while they checked his ID for them to hurry UPPP. I finally get him to his room, in bed. He's happily eating his milkshake with a spoon. His mouth was a mess of blood and milkshake. He asked me for a kiss. I gave him a peck. We're married now. Edit. Wow. Thanks for all the love, y'all. He's just as sweet when he's not sedated too, so I'm a lucky girl. My mom woke up from dental surgery, and when we were leaving the surgeon's office, he gave her a goodie bag with floss and a toothbrush and stuff, and the whole way home she kept asking if she could eat the candy that the dentist gave her. Every time I told her there was no candy, she looked so heartbroken, like a little kid when their goldfish dies or something. Then we stopped at CVS on the way home, and she wandered off. I found her in the candy aisle holding a giant bag of fun-sized candy, and when I told her to put it back on the shelf, she dropped it on the floor and galloped away laughing at me. I was under general anesthesia to get my gallbladder removed. As I was being wheeled back through the double doors, there was a giant TV screen that listed the surgeries going on. I was way too loopy to actually read it, but I swear I saw elbowectomy and started hysterically laughing over the idea of removing an elbow and being left with a floppy arm. Apparently what I actually said was elbow out jello, and then passed out. Elbow Jello, great band name. A little girl was going under, and she was holding her mother's hand. She reached out for my hand with her other, and as she was going out she joined mine with her mother's and said, "You would be a nice daddy." I probably went beetroot red as I blushed. LMAO, my daughter does this same shit with her Krav Maga instructor and he's like 12 years younger than me. It's so embarrassing. She doesn't have the excuse of being on drugs though. She just really likes that instructor. Sounds like she's just trying to be a good wing woman. The end. Thanks for watching.